Having trouble moving this slide. There we go. Okay, so I will do a quick introduction of Climate-KIC. Morten will take us through climate entrepreneurship and into our the nitty-gritty of the Climate-Accelerator program. We'll also have Wallace, Yasmina, and Mito touch on points in there, and then we'll take you through the application process, and then we'll have time at the end for Q&A. And as Wallace mentioned throughout the presentation, please feel free to add any questions that you have in the chat or to introduce yourself and your organization. Okay, so understanding EIT Climate-KIC, maybe some of you have heard of us before, maybe you have not, but essentially what we are trying to do is tackle the climate emergency with innovation. We are one of the first innovation, knowledge and innovation communities that was developed in 2010. And as most of you know, the demand is growing for climate action. And we are at the point now where we don't have the scale to match the urgency of this challenge. Our position is that given the inadequacy of business as usual, no one has all the answers or the solutions that are needed to meet the climate emergency at this time. And so individual innovation projects and business solutions, however impressive that they are, don't fundamentally change the underlying systems in cities, regions, or industry value chains. And so what we're trying to do is large-scale impact. And to do that, we need to look for integration and leverage points. And this requires what we call a systems innovation approach. So finding ways for joint programming, joint funding, and blended finance to come together to catalyze whole system transformations, from transportation to green spaces, air pollution, food waste, jobs, everything across the board. And so, as I quickly mentioned, we are Europe's leading climate innovation agency, harnessing systems innovations globally to transform whole places and industry value chains by 2030. And what we're looking at is a systems innovation approach, which needs action on a wide range of change levers all at once. So connecting, testing, integrating, and seeking the catalytic and exponential effects. And to achieve this radical transformative change, we must engage with innovation differently. And so in partnership with others like you, we forge the tools, connect solutions, and mobilize funding, and build the skills and capacities needed to provoke this shift in mindsets. And we are focused primarily on building a place-based model of innovation that enables cities and regions to address ambitious climate agendas. And here are a few of the partners that are in our network. So we bridge together the private sector, the public sector, cities, industries, corporates, governments to make this change happen at the scale needed to address climate change. And it's this large-scale learning by doing approach that helps us test and produce actionable intelligence from our portfolio of innovations. Our 4 focus areas are climate entrepreneurship, our large-scale place-based demonstrations, which we refer to as deep demonstrations, systems learning and skills, and community and collaboration. So today we're going to be primarily focused on our climate entrepreneurship arm, because that's where the Climate-Accelerator lives. Let me just double check that nobody else is waiting. I think we're good. And so through climate entrepreneurship, we collaborate with entrepreneurship support organizations like you, also funders and investors, to support impact-driven startups and accelerate climate solutions at the speed and scale required for systemic change. Here is a look at our track record. So these are the numbers updated since 2022. We've supported over 6,000 startups over our 11 years of existence, 12, 11 years of existence, with almost 3 billion in investment attracted. And we currently have 94 climate safe portfolio companies, which Mito will probably give some more details on as well. These are companies that Climate-KIC has invested in that have gone through our program. So I will now pass it on to Morten. I hope that gives you a bit of a understanding of Climate-KIC.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Krista. And I would like to also encourage, if you have any questions to the presentation, please feel free to put it in the chat. We will answer any questions afterwards. So first of all, how does entrepreneurship add into the overall narrative of Climate-KIC? And
sorry, I was trying to highlight you, Morten, but we'll let you go. Go ahead.
So you could say, please move on to the next slide. So we have been working with entrepreneurship and with startups and also scaling startups for as long as we have been existing. And what we are offering is different areas. So the capacity building, we see this as extremely important for the startups in order to make sure that they can help us not just in incremental change, but also in actually making these systematic change that we're focusing on. And here we have different ways of supporting our partners, both in terms of programs and narratives. We also see that in the venture scaling here, it's important that there's access to finance and of course to ventures. I think Mito, he will go a little bit more into deep with this later. And also, of course, that we are focusing and supporting the right startups. Like we want to make it a better world and thereby supporting the startups that have a technology that actually can make a positive climate impact. And we will also focus a little bit on this later. Then the last part is that we are not just focusing on the on scaling, but also creating a community that is often where we have an important role as a global organization. Please, the next slide. So how do we actually scale it? As we can see from the entrepreneurship support, then through our network, and then also funded by different entities. There's different ways within how we're supporting. Of course, the focusing on the main areas, the business development, the access to mentors, but also that we can work together with the right partners. And here the partners, as Krista was mentioning, are you, but it's also all the different stakeholders within the our network. So that's where we come together within the community. And of course, the funding part is extremely important. That's what everybody is focusing on to make sure that we have enough funding for actually doing what we want to do. Please, the next line. So this is the different areas that we are supporting. So the climate fund, where we are working together with the early stage, the ideation, where we have the climate fund, where we're working together with different cities in order to define the different areas that are the main areas of challenges. The climate launchpad, where we have the more early stage startups that are both incorporated and some are in the initial phase of being incorporated, taking that on to incorporated startups that are then accelerated through the Climate-KIC. We have 3 different phases that we are focusing on in order to make sure that we can then arrive at the scaling. And there we are supporting them with the climate safe that will be that we will touch upon later. Next slide. So yeah, we have touched a little bit upon this, but it might be important to say that our success has been quite extended. We have been, for the last many years, accelerating quite a few startups, as you can see, 2,100 and counting still. And we want to extend this and scale even further. And that's why we're looking for new partners to support us. The capital raise for the startups, that's also a rather important figure. We see that as the only way to make this systemic transformation. And of course, making sure that we have the right programs around the world. Next slide, please. So what do we then do? Like, we have everything available for you. We have the tools with different technical assistance. We have the best practices from running the climate accelerators around the world. We have the branding that you can use as you are partnering with us, so you can utilize our branding and make sure that you're also able to attract the right financing. The impact, of course, as I mentioned quite a few times, the climate impact, both of the startups, but also you as a partner, making sure that you can use it and make the right impact. The community, we have quite a few communities where we are supporting the startups, but also you as partner. So we are all aligned and make sure that we are running in the same direction. Our reach is quite extensive, and we utilize this both to make the community stronger, but also to promote and make sure that you are attracting the interesting startups that might have been part of our program already, or also have been somewhere in our network. And the last part, of course, the investment that we cannot emphasize that enough. That's also often where it goes, where it becomes difficult, where you need to make sure that the right investment is attractive. And I will hand it over to Mito.
Yeah, thanks, Morten. So hi everyone. As you've seen, we've been supporting startups over the past 10 or so years. We've accelerated more than 6,000 companies through the various programs we've managed throughout this time. And what we've come to notice is, as part of the accelerator programs, the startups get a lot of support during the program, typically 3 to 6 months. And but after the program is finished, basically we do not have or maintain the relationship with these startups, and they do not get much support. And so in order to basically continue providing support to startups once they've graduated from the accelerator programs, what we've designed and implemented last year is what we're calling the Climate-SAFE program. For those of you who are unaware of the SAFE stands for Simple Agreement for Future Equity, and the idea being it's a services for equity agreement. So once a company graduates from the accelerator program, they have the option to join the Climate-SAFE program. And there what we do is we provide follow-on services, long-term services to the startups in return for a future equity stake in the business. And so this is something we implemented last year, and which was extremely successful. So we have the SAFE signed with 94 companies across 27 different jurisdictions. And so what we're doing is saying that we can help you continue supporting you once you've graduated with things like carbon impact forecasting and validation, which is something we provide the Climate-SAFE companies. We give these companies access to the Climate Hive community, which is a Climate-KIC community to connect the different stakeholders within related to our organization, such as corporates, universities, different startups, and different public entities as well. We also provide fundraising support to these startups. So we have our own Climate-KIC development marketplace, where we have 400 plus registered climate tech investors from across the world. And so basically, startups, once they graduate from the accelerator program, they go on to raise seed rounds, and they struggle to find the relevant investors. And so this support service that we provide helps these startups to connect with the right investors and raise the amount they're looking for. We also provide commercialization opportunities. So as was mentioned previously in this presentation, we also work with what we call deep demos, and so we work with large challenge owners from across Europe. And so here, given the connections we have there, we try to connect our startups, we try to connect these innovations that we're seeing come through these accelerator programs with these different commercial opportunities. Given we're part of the EIT community and the wider EU, under the wider EU umbrella, we also have a different network of support from other EU organizations. So we work closely with the Horizon Results platform. We have an agreement with the EIC to help fast-track companies to receive access to further grant money as well as equity. We also have, we are in the process right now of raising a fund as well, which is a seed fund to focus on supporting these companies once they graduate from the accelerator program and have signed the SAFE agreement. So what we've seen, again, the companies come to the accelerator program, they graduate, and then in a lot of cases, they struggle to receive money from more traditional VCs. And so we're raising this fund to further support these startups and help them bridge the gap between post-accelerator and being attractive enough for more traditional VCs. So these are the typical services that we provide to these startups. Again, we've implemented this last year. We already have 94 companies that we're supporting with this. And we think it's a win-win basically situation for the startups. Obviously, they get access to all these services, but also for the accelerator partners, we think this also adds a lot of value because we see that the companies who get this additional support end up being more successful in terms of fundraising, getting their first clients. And so the metrics for the accelerator partners are also typically improved once a company sign the SAFE agreement. And then obviously for Climate-KIC, we take a potential equity stake in the business. And then if there are potential exits, then we reinvest this amount into further developing the ecosystem and supporting more startups and innovations coming from across Europe. So this is basically how the Climate Safe is developed. I think it's hard to explain in a few minutes, so I'm happy to answer any questions towards the end of the presentation. So I think I'll pass on to my colleague Yasmina, who's going to talk more about the carbon impact forecasting tool that we provide.
Yeah, hi everyone. So you might be wondering, what does our program look like and why to even calculate our carbon, or why we have this program. To kind of reiterate a little bit what Morten and Mido were saying, the advantage of calculating or understanding more kind of your climate impact, or for startups to do that, the benefits are that on one hand, what you can do is help startups understand their carbon footprint and their climate impact, but also be there with them to teach them on how to do it, and then to facilitate. These are maybe, let's say, heavy calculations, so try to translate the scientific data that we get into an easy understood reports and language that can be used and be attractive for investors, but also like for maybe other partners as well. So our methodology is a suite of services for measuring, forecasting, and monitoring a wide range of environmental and social impact matrices. But then I'm going to be focusing mainly on the avoided emission that we usually offer. So it's composed of two main steps. The first one is a climate impact hypothesis, and then a climate impact validation. So the hypothesis is usually kind of asking startups to put in general numbers of their performance, and then with that we can have a global estimation of, let's say, how much CO2 emission their overall operation is doing. And then the validation phase is going into a bit more detail. So we have a hypothesis. So we think this is how much a startup's footprint is, but then the validation is actually going a bit more details in calculation. And with that comes, because it's heavy on calculation, we have a workshop and coaching sessions where we actually work with the startups, kind of helping them and building capacity internally in their company for them to be able to kind of measure their own impact, but also eventually in the future, hopefully track their impact. And the interesting thing in the validation here is that if you sign up for the Climate Safe, this is usually offered, it comes as a free service within the Climate Safe. And of course, this is very technical. So of course, if you have more questions, I'm happy to answer later as well at this end of the session. And then I'll pass it on to Wallace.
Thanks, Yasmina. As I mentioned earlier, so I'm working on our gender mainstreaming work here at Climate-KIC. And in general, I think inclusivity and diversity is so important in our sector to make sure that the innovations that we're making are representative of the people we're facing, and also that they strengthen the cause. You know, there's lots of studies that show that diverse teams equal better innovations and more strengthen kind of financial returns. So we're focusing particularly on gender in this approach, which is obviously a kind of priority also of the kind of EU Commission Gender Equality Plan, and a big focus in terms of kind of particularly around the climate startup innovation space. It's quite a men kind of heavy dominated space. So we have a really great toolbook, handbook which we designed particularly for entrepreneurship support organizations, called the We Climb Equally Handbook. It's completely open. You can also access it today if you'd like to. And what it does is it gives you a kind of overview of clear actions that you can take to make sure that you are incorporating women and other kind of marginalized genders into your program, and ideas for strengthening, kind of hitting those targets. And what we'd like from partners who are part of this program is to see a clear overview of them taking kind of this gender mainstreaming approach seriously and engaging with it, and setting clear targets to improve the participation of women, non-binary people, and other marginalized genders in their programs. From our side, we can offer support through the handbook. We can offer support through our case studies and other ESOs that we've worked with, so that they can understand the best way to do this and how to improve it. And also, I'm also around to support and be a kind of advisor on these issues and how to increase the kind of participation and involvement in this space. I'm not sure who I'm passing on to next.
Me.
Back to you.
I will just say a quick thing on our branding. I will add me as a little spotlight. So of course, if you decide to deliver one of our ClimAccelerator programs, we love to work with your organization to make sure that the co-branding is really strong. And with that, we provide a brand guideline. We also provide you with a digital toolkit to promote the program at different milestones. So your open call session, interesting stories about the startups or where they are in the development phase, also just an ending summary of the program. And we have social media and website templates as well to support you with that. And of course, our logo bearing the EU flag also gives a lot of credibility to your program and your organization when you co-brand the ClimAccelerator. And of course, we're always here to help increase the reach and visibility. So we utilize our channels and our networks. Specifically, we have a dedicated LinkedIn channel, but we also have newsletters and an exclusive Climate Hive startup group, which Mito mentioned as well. So we utilize all of our channels to really boost reach and visibility for your program to attract the most impact-driven startups in your area. And we can also, in addition, support with writing news articles and blogs about your startups or about your program. This is just a quick overview of our 2022 year in review. I'll play it quite quickly. It's only less than 2 minutes long.
You might need to share your sound, Krista, if you wanted to. I don't know if you are or not. It's just at the top, Krista, if you go to your, I think it's your sharing options at the top. Sorry, you can tell we're all Microsoft Outlook people here. Zoom is not our, our preferred option. We can also share the video afterwards. I'm sure that people can watch it afterwards and see the
Sorry, you
demos
couldn't
after.
hear the
No, it's
loud
okay. It's a bit of
guitar
a nightmare
noise.
on Zoom. Don't worry.
All right, I'll pass it over to Morten for this section of the session.
Thank you very much, Krista. And yeah, we're happy to share the video afterwards. So as you have noticed, we have this open call for expression of interest, which we are very excited about. We have got a lot of initial interest. For us, this is important because we want to reach out because we get a lot of requests from people that would like to work with us, but we also want to reach outside these circles. So this is your opportunity to work together with us. Who are we looking for? We're looking for potential organizations, ESOs as we're calling it, in enterprise support organizations that can support and collaborate with us within Europe. And at this specifically expression of interest, we are looking for Europe and the third countries associated to Horizon Europe. In case that you are located in other areas like Switzerland or other interesting places around the world, please reach out to us and we're happy to have a bilateral dialogue. This call is open until the 14th of July. And we have the call document available. I know it's a rather long document. However, please read through it. And in case you have questions, it's better to ask and answer the questions before than afterwards. So please look through the document. The next slide. So as mentioned before, we have also what is called the deep demonstrations, where we have specific large-scale projects, but also specific requests for startups that can actually make a difference. The 3 different areas that we have defined for this call are within the how do we make things, like how are the solutions that startup can support and create in order to make the industrial production even better. We have within the agri-food, what are we eating? How can we make these sustainable? And the last part, how do we live? We all know all the cities are having tremendous issues with making the sustainable level actually carbon neutral. And we see a huge demand within all 3 areas. And these are the 3 main topics where we have both the demand, but are looking for the right collaboration partners. Next slide. As we also want to make sure that everything is aligned with our mission and we are choosing the right partners, we have specific criteria of who we are working for and working with. So here, just to put it very transparent, excellent impact, uniqueness, and that you as an organization is aligned with our portfolio strategy. There's a link to the strategic agenda, and we will address them in the evaluation of your proposal. It's not that we are very strict, but we want to make sure that we are working together with the right organization. So as you can see, there's a maximum score of 6, and we have a threshold of 3. And this is very normal procedure within EU sphere. Next slide, please. So this is also important to explain the voluntary revenue share. So we are supporting and working together with our partners in order to create sustainable programs. And the way we do that is that we allocate colleagues that can then also support in the fundraising part. We want ideally to make sure that there's grants available for the startups. It's not always possible. However, we have what we call a voluntary revenue share. So if within the programs, they have different thresholds, we would suggest that you then share a minor part of this together with us. As you can see, it's rather low. It's less than, it's very low figures. We suggest that this is the right approach for maintaining our operational system and also continue working together with you. So these are indications, and as you can see, it's voluntarily. However, we will strongly suggest that if you see this as a doable way forward, also to add that into your application. Next slide. So just to run through the procedure. So your application will be assessed according to evaluation criteria after the 14th of July. Some of you might already be on holiday. We have 2 evaluators that have promised to work all through July in order to assess all the different proposals. You will get a comprehensive feedback, and in case it's a positive one, then there will also be an introduction call. You will get access to all our material. In your application, you will actually get access also to our welcoming package with all the information on Notion, and that's available through the long document for the expression of interest. Another reason for reading through the full document. We will then sign the memorandum of understanding together with you in order to agree on what we are working towards and how we are working together. And after this is signed, then there's the onboarding part where we will stabilize, making sure that we all agree on what are the next steps and how we are collaborating together. The application as such doesn't need to take a long time. It can be done in 15 minutes. But if you want to do it right and the best way, please add your company profile, your pitch documents as a Google Drive or other ways of sharing your documents. So it's not just 2 lines that we have to assess. Of course, you need to make sure that the documents that you're sharing, that we can actually see the documents and they're accessible for us. So you might have questions today. We're happy to answer them, and also until the 14th of July, very happy to answer any questions. Please use the email address climateaccelerator@climatekic.org, and we will in due time get back to you on your questions. Next slide. And apply today, I like that. You can also apply tomorrow, of course. Just remember that the deadline for this expression of interest is the 14th of July. Thank you.
Is it helpful if I go through some of the questions that have been in the chat already? I've been sort of monitoring it, and then we can maybe open it up if there's any more from there. Thanks, everyone. Really nice to see such a wide variety of people here and visible. Thanks for sharing your organizations. Just going from the top down, so we had a question from Eleanor who asked, can companies with no previous experience running an accelerator apply?
I can answer this one. Yes, you can apply, and we're happy also, of course, to educate you and in order to make you able to run a climate accelerator. However, you need to consider very wisely if you have never run an accelerator program before, if you have the right local network with the stakeholders, and that it's not just a good idea among 10 other ideas that you have on the table, but you're actually ready to commit, simply because we don't want you to waste time of making an application that then might not be the right organization, that we might not be the right organization. So give us some thoughts and read through the expression of interest document, so you have a very good understanding of if you're the right organization or not. And then, as I mentioned, if you have the right elements for running a climate accelerator, we're happy to educate you and mentoring you during the process. However, there is some basic criteria that I would suggest that is considered before you embark on the application process. And again, if there's any specific questions, please feel free to write them in the chat or ask specifically.
Great, thanks, Martin. We had a question from Lucy who said that our organization is a member of EIT Climate-KIC since the beginning. Thank you for that, Lucy. As community members, do we access specific services?
So within our community, we are opening up this expression of interest for all different organizations. Within our specific climate members, we have additional services. And for those that have not been contacted, in case that they want to run specific programs with us, then please reach out to your specific contact person so we can make sure that this is happening sooner than later. This should have already been done. So very good that you are flagging this if you're already a member organization. In case you are not a member organization, that is not a criteria for this expression of interest. So we are, of course, very happy when you join us as a member. However, this is open for all the different organizations that we see a potential for working together with.
Great, thanks, Martin. The next one's from Agnieszka. It says on our slide, innovation support ecosystem, what does the 1.5 fund mean? Mido, I think you talked a little bit about this, but maybe you can just expand a little bit on it.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for the question. Yeah, so what we're trying to do now is, so we just started with the Climate Safe program, as mentioned last year, and we've noticed there's a bit of a gap between the funding when startups graduate from the accelerator programs and when they're attractive enough for traditional VCs and investors. So there's that gap where companies graduated, they have the product, they have a team, they have a nice business plan, but they still haven't got their first clients or first revenue traction, and therefore a traditional VC would say, well, this is not of interest, you don't have revenue. And so we're basically in the process of developing this fund, which we are calling the 1.5 seed fund. And the idea being is to invest in these startups. So the startups that have come through these accelerator programs, that we've seen their progress, we know they have a lot of potential because we've been following them through the accelerator programs, and we would look to further provide capital and support to these investors. So that's the 1.5 fund. It's still a work in progress, so that's not up and running yet, but hopefully by early next year we should have that available. So it's basically additional capital and support for startups that come to the accelerator program.
Great, thanks, Mido. We had some questions about the documents and the kind of recordings and stuff. We'll share everything afterwards, so don't worry about that, and kind of signpost you to the open call on our website. The question from Aryan, which said, will the voluntary revenue share also count as fee to become partner in Climate-KIC? I think this was on the slide that you presented, Morten, around the revenue share.
Well, it's two different areas. So in this case, it would not count as membership fee. Sorry.
Thank you. The next one from Martha said, what would be the ideal organization in terms of size, track record, network, basic criteria?
A very good question. And if we were able to standardize everything, then maybe it would be easier across the whole world. However, we have seen that it doesn't matter in terms of size or position of the organization we're working together with. It's a big question of how engaged they are in the process, how well an established network they have in the local ecosystem, and also how do they see a way to solving the local challenges. And that is sometimes very difficult to define because there's a huge difference, I can say, just within Denmark from east to west. And there, in terms of size, we're working with very big organizations, universities, but we are also working with very, very small startups. Both are successful, collaborating with us, but both organizations, they have dedicated resources and engagement with us. So I think it's a part of how much are you willing to engage and how much do you see this as an opportunity. We see it as a fantastic opportunity, and that's why we want to extend it to you so we can ideally scale this fantastic opportunity to climate relevant startups.
Great, thanks, Morten. We have a question from Lena, who said, do startups taking part in the Climate-KIC service have to become members of Climate?
No, again,
yeah.
that's optional.
Optional, yeah. Perfect. From Fabian, will there be an annual ACO call like this in case we might not be ready this year, but in the future want to become an organizer? The answer is yes. Right?
I would say yes, but I also want to add to this that this is we get a lot of interest for this call, which we are very happy about. The next part might be that we will focus on other areas within the world, the global south, most likely, and then return to Europe, ideally in 1 year time, but I cannot promise that. So again, in case that you see an interest within 1 year time and not now, use our Climate Accelerator at climatekic.org and use that to remind us in case that you're saying, okay, now it's not for me, but in 1 year time, it might be. Thereby, we also are able to support you in 1 year's time. Thank you.
Great, thank you. A question around, does the partner organization have to be a single organization, or can it be a partnership of, say, 2 to 3 smaller organizations?
It can be a partnership of 2 to 3 small organizations. We would sign an agreement with all organizations, and we would also assess, in this case, all 2 to 3 organizations. We have experienced that it can be tricky to work together if the roles are not very well defined. So in case that you are 2 to 3 small organizations, align first amongst yourself to make sure that all partners, they have an understanding of who is doing what, so you avoid difficulties later in the process.
Great, thank you. And then we had a question for Mido under our climate safe slide. We mentioned the future equity stake in the business. What is the typical equity stake we generally take?
Yeah, thanks for the question. It really depends. I mean, if you're familiar with how a safe agreement works, it's a simple agreement for future equity, right? So we're saying that this agreement is worth worth 50,000, and then this 50,000 will convert at the valuation set in the future funding round. So it depends, but what's I think special about the way we put the safe is that we don't have a valuation cap, which means this 50,000 will always convert at the valuation or close to the 20% discount to the valuation that's set in the future round. From what we've seen from the ones that converted already, it's typically 1 to 3% equity stake that we eventually get into the business, but it really depends. So I give you an example of the opposite, where we got a really tiny percentage. It was a company that participated in the Climate Safe. We gave them the 50,000, and then within 6 months, they managed to raise 10 million at a 50 million valuation. So we got a very, very, very small percentage because we don't have a valuation cap. So basically, our 50,000 converted at a 40 million valuation, and therefore we had a much smaller percentage than 1%. But typically, we would assume it's somewhere between 1 to 3%. Happy to discuss this in more detail at a later time if you like.
Great, thank you. We had a couple of questions around kind of the requirements from partners. My suggestion would be that we look over the open call and stuff afterwards, because it'll be a bit easier to digest since we went through that. We had a question from Sandali who said, just out of curiosity, I wanted to know if organizations can be accepted for people residing in African countries.
So sorry, I didn't hear the question.
Oh, sorry. If people living in African countries can apply.
Yeah, so as I mentioned before, this specific expression of interest is focusing on Europe and the associated countries. In case that you are located elsewhere in the world, you're welcome to reach out to our, send an email to ClimAccelerator@climatekic.org. And also, as I mentioned, we most likely, based on the initial feedback and interest, that we would have the same opportunity in other parts of the world later this year or next year. So in case that you're in a hurry and not within the eligible countries, then send an email to our Climate Accelerator email account, and there we will take that discussion bilateral.
And again, we'll make that email address clear in the information post these so people can reach out. So I think at the moment that's everything in the chat. Maybe we can just pause to see if anyone has a question here, can raise their hand or yeah, jump in there or type in the chat.